Imagine needing to earn over $237,000 a year just to afford a median-priced home. Not a mansion, not a luxury penthouse, just an average house in an average neighborhood. If you think that sounds insane, you're right. But that's the reality in California right now. And before you assume you can just move somewhere cheaper, I need to show you something that'll change everything you thought you knew about the American housing market. Hit that subscribe button, because what's happening in these 10 cities isn't just a local problem. It's a nationwide crisis that's rewriting the rules of homeownership, and the cities suffering the worst might shock you. From coastal paradises, where fewer than 1 in 200 homes are affordable, to Sunbelt cities that promised escape but delivered financial ruin, we're about to reveal where the American dream has become mathematically impossible. Number 10. San Diego, California. The beaches stretch for miles, the weather stays perfect year-round, and the cost of living will drain every penny you'll ever make. San Diego has officially crossed into territory that housing experts call impossibly unaffordable. You'd think the beauty would be worth it, but when the typical household income sits around $80,000 and the median home price hovers near $900,000, the math becomes a nightmare. The gap isn't just wide, it's a canyon that swallows families whole. What makes this worse is the compounding effect of climate-related insurance costs. As wildfires rage through Southern California with increasing frequency, insurance companies are either jacking up premiums or pulling out of the market entirely. Homeowners who somehow scrape together a down payment now face annual insurance bills that rival their property taxes. The city attracted waves of climate refugees from hotter, more fire-prone areas, but those same people are now discovering they've jumped from the frying pan into an even more expensive fire. Young professionals, military families stationed at the massive naval bases, and service workers who keep the tourism economy running are all being systematically priced out. The rental market offers no relief either, with average rents consuming over 50% of typical incomes. San Diego represents the perfect storm of natural beauty, limited buildable land, and runaway speculation that's created a market where only the wealthy can participate. But this is just the beginning. Number 9. Honolulu, Hawaii. Paradise has a price tag, and it's one that locals can no longer afford to pay. Honolulu sits on an island with finite land, surrounded by thousands of miles of ocean, making expansion physically impossible. When you combine that geographic constraint with an endless stream of mainland buyers and international investors treating Hawaiian real estate like a vacation home lottery, you get a crisis that's forcing native Hawaiians off their ancestral lands. The median home price in Honolulu exceeds $1 million, while the median household income barely breaks $70,000. That's a ratio that makes home ownership a fantasy for anyone not bringing money from elsewhere. The tourism economy that drives the islands creates jobs, sure, but there's service positions that pay nowhere near enough to compete with tech executives and retirees cashing out equity from the mainland. Even renting has become unsustainable, with studio apartments demanding $3,000 a month. The result is an exodus of young people who love their home but cannot afford to stay. Families that have lived in Hawaii for generations are being replaced by part-time residents who visit twice a year. The cultural loss is immeasurable, but the housing crisis makes it inevitable. Zoning laws designed to preserve the island's character ironically prevent the dense housing development that might offer relief. What happens next will devastate you even more. Number 8. San Jose, California. Welcome to the heart of Silicon Valley, where even the people creating the technology that powers the world can't afford to live near their offices. San Jose holds a distinction that should be impossible. 100% of its neighborhoods are unaffordable for the average married couple earning the median income. Not 90%, not 95%, every single neighborhood. The tech boom that made this region the wealthiest in America also destroyed its housing market beyond repair. Software engineers pulling in six-figure salaries are forced to live in shared housing or commute 2 hours each way. The median home price sits well above $1.5 million, and that buys you a modest three-bedroom ranch built in the 1960s. Venture capital money floods into startups, stock options create paper millionaires overnight, and all that wealth chases the same limited housing stock, driving prices into the stratosphere. Longtime residents who bought decades ago are sitting on gold mines, but their children have zero chance of staying in the community where they grew up. The city has tried to encourage development, but neighborhood opposition and the sheer cost of construction make it nearly impossible to build anything that isn't luxury housing. Techies who thought they'd get rich and buy their dream home are discovering that even $200,000 salaries don't go far when homes cost 8 times that amount. San Jose proves that even in the wealthiest regions, the housing crisis spares no one. And it gets worse. Number 7. San Francisco, California. The poster child for housing dysfunction keeps finding new ways to make the crisis worse. San Francisco's problems are legendary. Restrictive zoning that dates back decades, neighborhood groups that block every development project, and a political culture that talks endlessly about affordability while doing almost nothing to increase supply. The median home price hovers around $1.4 million in a city where the median household income is roughly $130,000. That ratio is painful. But the real story is in the extremes. Starter homes don't exist. Anything under $1 million is either a teardown or so far from the city center that the commute becomes unbearable. The tech boom filled San Francisco with high earners who could afford to outbid everyone else. But even that population is shrinking as companies embrace remote work and employees realize they can live anywhere. Yet prices refuse to fall significantly because supply remains strangled. The homelessness crisis plays out on the same streets where multi-million-dollar Victorians sit behind manicured hedges. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, and police officers cannot afford to live in the city they serve, creating longer response times and staffing shortages. The exodus that started during the health crisis accelerated, but it hasn't brought relief because the people leaving are often middle-class families while the wealthy remain. San Francisco had decades to fix this and chose not to. Now the consequences are permanent. But there's one California city even worse. Number 6, Los Angeles, California. The entertainment capital of the world has become the most unaffordable major metro area for typical households in America. 97.2% of Los Angeles neighborhoods are financially out of reach for the average family. Let that sink in. Fewer than 3% of the entire city is accessible to people earning the median income. LA's sprawl was supposed to be the answer. The city spread across hundreds of square miles, swallowing up smaller communities and pushing development into every available valley and hillside. But sprawl hit its limits. You can't build into the ocean. The mountains create natural barriers, and the remaining open space is either protected or too fire-prone to insure. The median home price exceeds $900,000, while the median household income sits around $75,000. Even entertainment industry workers, the people who create the content that defines the city's identity, are being priced out. Production assistants, writers, and mid-level crew members cannot afford to live near the studios where they work. The freeways are parking lots because people are forced to live 50 or 60 miles from their jobs. Rents offer no escape, with average one-bedroom apartments demanding over $2,500 monthly. The homelessness crisis in LA is the worst in the nation, a direct result of housing costs that have severed any connection to local wages. The city keeps approving luxury developments while affordable housing remains a rounding error in new construction. LA's crisis is structural, and nothing on the horizon suggests improvement. And yet, there's a city facing something even more terrifying. Number 5, Miami, Florida. This is where the housing crisis reaches its absolute peak of absurdity. Miami ranks as the least affordable metro area in the entire United States, with fewer than 1 in 200 homes affordable to typical households. Read that again. Your chances of finding an affordable home in Miami are worse than your chances of flipping heads 200 times in a row. But the data gets darker. UBS ranked Miami as the #1 housing bubble risk in the entire world for the second year running. Not just in America, globally. The combination of speculative investment, international money laundering, luxury condo developments, and a tourism-dependent economy has created a market completely disconnected from local wages. The median home price has rocketed past $600,000, while the median household income barely touches $65,000. Miami's appeal is obvious. No state income tax, tropical weather, vibrant culture, and a growing tech scene trying to position itself as the next Silicon Valley. But that appeal is exactly what's destroying affordability. Wealthy Americans fleeing high-tax states, international buyers parking money in real estate, and crypto millionaires treating Miami like a playground have turned the housing market into a casino. And now, the climate bill is coming due. Hurricane risk, flooding, rising sea levels, and insurance costs that have quadrupled are layering a crisis on top of a crisis. Some insurance companies won't even write new policies in South Florida anymore. Homeowners lucky enough to find coverage are paying $10,000 or more annually, and that's before you factor in the mortgage. Locals who grew up in Miami, whose families built the city, are being systematically replaced by outsiders with deeper pockets. The outlook isn't just bad, it's catastrophic. But we're not done yet. Number 4, Las Vegas, Nevada. The desert mirage of affordability has evaporated faster than water in the Mojave sun. Las Vegas sold itself as the escape valve for Californians who couldn't afford the coast anymore. No state income tax, relatively cheap land, and a booming service economy made it seem like the smart move. But in just 1 year, the percentage of unaffordable neighborhoods jumped to 74.1%. The influx of California equity refugees drove prices through the roof, and now the people who moved to Vegas for affordability are discovering they've been trapped. The median home price has surged past $450,000, while the median income remains stuck around $65,000. That ratio is unsustainable, and the cracks are showing. The service economy that powers Las Vegas pays poverty wages. Dealers, servers, bartenders, and hospitality workers keep the casinos running, but they can't afford to live near the Strip anymore. Commutes stretch longer, traffic worsens, and the quality of life that attracted people in the first place disappears. Underneath all this sits an even bigger problem: water. Las Vegas draws from Lake Mead, which is at historic lows due to drought and overuse. The city has implemented conservation measures, but growth continues unchecked. How do you sustain a metro area of 2.5 million people in a desert that's running out of water? Developers keep building because demand remains, but the entire model is unsustainable. Vegas represents the Sunbelt dream dying in real time, and the hangover is going to be brutal. What comes next is even more shocking. Number 3, Austin, Texas. The darling of the remote work revolution has become its biggest cautionary tale. Austin was supposed to be different. Lower cost of living than the coasts, no state income tax, a thriving tech scene, and a culture that attracted young professionals by the thousands. When remote work exploded, Austin became the promised land. Companies relocated headquarters, workers flooded in from San Francisco and New York, and the housing market went absolutely berserk. But the party ended fast. The median home price more than doubled in just 5 years, soaring past $550,000. The median income couldn't keep pace, sitting at around $80,000. Suddenly, the affordability that made Austin attractive vanished completely. Tech layoffs swept through the companies that had just relocated, eliminating the high-paying jobs that justified the prices. Remote workers who moved to Austin are now being called back to offices in other states, forcing them to choose between another move or brutal commutes. The locals who made Austin weird and interesting have been priced out entirely. The music venues that define the city are closing because the artists can't afford rent. The weird has been replaced by generic luxury developments that could be anywhere. Even worse, many of the California refugees who drove prices up are now leaving Austin because it's become as expensive as the places they fled. The housing market is stuck in no man's land. Too expensive for locals, too uncertain for investors, and too volatile for families looking for stability. Austin's boom-bust cycle is a warning about what happens when housing policy can't keep up with hype. But there are still two cities facing even bleaker futures. Number 2, Phoenix, Arizona. The Sunbelt dream is dying in the desert heat, and Phoenix is ground zero for the collapse. For decades, Phoenix represented the affordable alternative. Wide open desert meant unlimited room to sprawl, no state income tax attracted businesses and retirees, and the warm winters seemed like paradise compared to northern snow. But sprawl hit its limits, and the consequences are piling up fast. The median home price has surged past $500,000, while the median income struggles to reach $70,000. That gap is crushing, but it's not even the scariest part. Phoenix is becoming unlivable. Summer temperatures now routinely hit 120 degrees. The city broke heat records year after year, and climate scientists warn it's only getting worse. Air conditioning isn't a luxury in Phoenix, it's survival. Electric bills during the summer months can exceed $500, adding to the financial strain. Water scarcity is the other sword hanging over Phoenix's head. The city depends on the Colorado River, which is drying up as the megadrought grinds into its third decade. Growth continues, but the resources to support that growth are disappearing. Developers keep building because they can still make money, but the long-term viability of a metro area of 5 million people in a desert with no water is questionable at best. Insurance companies are starting to factor climate risk into their calculations, meaning premiums are rising even as homes become harder to cool and water becomes scarcer. Phoenix represents a housing crisis layered on top of an existential crisis. People are paying $500,000 for homes in a place that might not be habitable in 20 years. That's not a housing market. That's a disaster waiting to happen. But there's one final city that somehow manages to be even worse. Number 1, New York City, New York, the impossible standard. The place where housing affordability goes to die. New York has always been expensive, but what's happening now crosses into territory that makes even the wealthy sweat. Manhattan requires an annual income exceeding $200,000 just to afford the median apartment. Not a penthouse, not a luxury high-rise, just a median unit. Brooklyn and Queens, once the affordable alternatives, have followed Manhattan into the stratosphere. The median home price across the 5 boroughs exceeds $750,000, while the median household income sits around $75,000. That 10-to-1 ratio is the worst in America. The city runs on essential workers. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, transit workers, sanitation crews, and service employees keep 8 million people fed, safe, and moving. But none of these people can afford to live in the city they serve. Commutes from affordable areas stretch 2 or 3 hours each way. Teachers live in Pennsylvania and commute to the Bronx. Nurses travel from Connecticut to work in Manhattan hospitals. The human cost is staggering, and the system is breaking. New York's crisis is structural and generational. Rent-stabilized apartments pass down through families like heirlooms because finding a new place means financial ruin. Young people stay in their childhood bedrooms into their 30s because independence is mathematically impossible. The city that defined American ambition now tells young people they're not welcome unless they're already wealthy. Luxury developments rise while affordable housing production remains a fraction of what's needed. Foreign investors park money in Manhattan real estate, leaving units empty while homeless encampments grow. The subway system crumbles, infrastructure fails, and the tax base erodes as middle-class families finally give up and leave. What made New York great was the collision of people from every background and income level. That collision is over. The rich are isolating themselves in vertical, gated communities, while everyone else fights for scraps. New York's housing crisis isn't just about money. It's about the death of the diverse, dynamic city that represented possibility. And there's no relief coming. These 10 cities represent the epicenter of a national housing crisis that's rewriting the American social contract. This isn't a temporary problem that'll fix itself when interest rates drop or the economy improves. This is structural. Decades of restrictive zoning, underinvestment in affordable housing, speculation treating homes as assets instead of shelter, and wages that haven't kept pace with costs have created a situation where homeownership is becoming a privilege reserved for the wealthy. The cities on this list are canaries in the coal mine. What's happening there will spread to more markets unless massive policy changes happen fast. But change requires political will, and the homeowners who benefit from rising prices vote at much higher rates than the renters who are suffering. If you're trying to figure out your next move, the options are brutal. You can wait and hope policy changes bring relief, but that could take decades. You can move to one of the remaining affordable metros, but those markets are absorbing refugees from expensive cities, and prices are rising there too. Or you can accept that homeownership might not be possible and plan accordingly. None of these are good options, but they're the reality. If this deep dive into the housing crisis opened your eyes, smash that like button, subscribe for more honest looks at the economy, and drop a comment telling me which city shocked you most. Share this with anyone trying to figure out where to live or whether to buy, because the decisions people make right now will affect their finances for decades. The housing crisis isn't coming, it's already here, and it's worse than you think.